The big metal doors of the Galactic Council opened with a loud sound that made everyone look up. Taeho Kim walked inside the huge room wearing his simple black suit. He looked so different from all the other beings in the chamber, the reptile people. Called Vorthok started making angry hissing sounds when they saw him. The bug-like creatures called Nexari clicked their sharp mouthparts together. They were scared. The room was enormous, with walls made of crystal that showed the stars outside. Floating lights gave everything a blue glow. There were seats arranged in a perfect circle, and each seat was made for a different type of alien being. Some seats were huge for the big rock people, some were small for the tiny energy beings, some had water tanks for the fish. People. Taeho looked around the room with calm eyes. He had studied every single species that would be here today. He knew what they ate, what they feared, and how they talked to each other, but he did not study them to hurt them. He studied them to understand them. This was something the other beings could not understand. Council leader Vexthal was the most powerful being in the room. His body was made of pure energy that glowed bright yellow inside a metal robot shell. He had 4 arms, and each arm was as thick as a tree. He raised all 4 arms up high, and the room became quiet. Everyone stopped talking. Everyone stopped moving. The silence was heavy and strange. Taeho could feel hundreds of eyes watching him. Some eyes were angry, some were scared, some were just confused. Why was this human here? Why had the council invited such a primitive species to their important meeting? Taeho walked slowly to his seat. His footsteps echoed in the quiet room. Each step seemed to make the other beings more nervous. The seat they gave him was plain and simple compared to the fancy chairs of the other delegates. It was made of basic metal and had no decorations. This was supposed to make him feel small and unimportant, but Taeho did not feel small. He felt ready. He had spent months preparing for this moment. He had read thousands of books about each species. He had learned their languages, their customs, their history. He knew things about them that they had forgotten. About themselves, behind him stood Commander Yuki Sato. She was his military advisor, but she looked nothing like what the aliens expected a human soldier to look like. She was calm and peaceful. Her uniform was clean and simple. She carried no visible weapons. The other species found this very strange. All their military people carried big weapons and wore heavy armor. The other delegates whispered to each other in their strange languages. They could not understand why Earth had sent these 2 quiet humans. The galaxy knew that humans had somehow stopped 3 big wars in the past year. They had done it without fighting, without shooting, without killing anyone. This made no sense to the other species. War was normal. In the galaxy it had always been normal. Different species fought over planets, over resources, over space routes. They had been fighting for thousands of years. It was just how things worked, but then humans appeared, and somehow they made the fighting stop. This scared the other species more than any weapon could. General Sektar of the Vorthok people leaned forward in his seat. His snake-like body was covered in red scales. His yellow eyes stared at Taeho with hatred. The Vorthok were famous for being warriors. They solved problems by fighting. They respected only strength and violence. They could not understand how humans won wars without fighting. Quinn speaker Zikti of the Nexari made clicking sounds with her mouth. She was talking to her advisors in their bug language. Her big compound eyes never stopped looking at Taeho. The Nexari were very smart and very organized. They planned everything perfectly, but humans had ruined their plans too. They had solved problems that the Nexari thought were impossible to solve. Taeho sat down in his simple chair. He put his hands on the table in front of him. On the table he placed a notebook made of paper and a pen made of metal. The other delegates stared at these primitive tools. They used computers that connected directly to their brains. They used holographic displays that floated in the air, but this human used paper and pen like some ancient creature. The room stayed quiet for a long time. Everyone was waiting for someone else to speak first. Finally, Council Leader Vexthal spoke. His voice sounded like thunder. His metal body creaked when he moved. The meeting would begin with the traditional ceremony. Each delegate would stand and recite the history of their species. They would talk about their great victories and their ancient enemies. They would make threats, disguised as promises. They would waste hours saying nothing important, but first they had to deal with the human problem. Nobody wanted to admit it, but they were all afraid. The human sitting quietly at the table had done something impossible. He had made peace where there had been war for centuries. He had solved problems that the smartest beings in the galaxy could not solve, and he had done it all by being nice. This made no sense to anyone in the room. Being nice was weakness, being kind was stupidity, the strong survived, and the weak died. This was the law of the galaxy, this was how things worked, but humans seemed to follow different laws, and somehow their laws worked. Better Tejo opened his notebook and picked up his pen. He began writing something. The scratching sound of pen on paper was the only noise in the huge room. Everyone watched him write. They wondered what he was writing. Was he making plans to conquer them? Was he studying their weaknesses? Was he preparing some kind of attack? What they did not know was that Tejo was writing down the names of their children. He had studied not just their military strength and their political power, he had studied their families, their hopes, their dreams. He knew that General Sektar had a daughter who wanted to be an artist. He knew that Queen Speaker Zikti had sons who were tired of war. He knew that every being in this room loved someone and wanted a better future for them. This was the human secret. They did not see enemies, they saw people. They did not see aliens. They saw families, they did not see problems. They saw opportunities to help. The other species thought this was foolish. They thought humans were weak and stupid, but they were wrong. Humans were the most dangerous species in the galaxy because they actually cared about everyone. Tejo finished writing and looked up. He smiled, a small, gentle smile that somehow made everyone in the room more nervous than any weapon could. A smile should not be frightening, but his smile promised change. And change was the most terrifying thing in the universe. The council leader finally spoke the words that would begin the formal meeting, but everyone knew that everything had already changed. The moment the human walked into the room, everything became different. The old ways of doing things were about to end, whether the galaxy wanted it or not. The first peace talk session began like all the others had for the past 300 years. General Sektar of the Vorthok stood up first. His red scales caught the light as he moved. His voice was deep and angry. Like distant thunder, he began to list all the crimes that other species had done to his people. The mining rights in the Kepler system belonged to the Vorthok, he said. The bug people had no right to build their colonies there. His ancestors had marked that territory with blood. They had fought and died for those worlds. The Nexari were thieves and invaders who deserved to be destroyed. Queen Speaker Zikti made angry clicking sounds with her mouthparts. Her compound eyes flashed with different colors. When General Sektar sat down, she stood up on her 6 legs. Her voice was high and sharp like breaking glass. The Vorthok were primitive savages, she said. They only knew how to fight and kill. The galaxy needed resources, and the Nexari knew how to use them wisely. The snake people just wanted to hoard everything for themselves. They were selfish and stupid. Behind them, other delegates began to shout and argue. The rock people, called Trilon, banged their stone fists on the table. The fish people and their water tanks made bubble sounds that meant they were angry. The energy beings flickered and sparked with rage. This went on for 3 long hours. The same arguments that had been made for decades filled the air. Each species blamed the others for everything wrong in the galaxy. Nobody listened to what anyone else said. They just waited for their turn to complain. Tejo sat quietly through all of this. He wrote notes in his paper notebook with his metal pen. He did not look bored or angry. He looked interested, like he was watching something fascinating. The other delegates noticed this, and it made them uncomfortable. Why was the human not getting upset? Why was he not defending anyone? Why was he just sitting there? Writing Commander Yuki Sato stood behind Tejo like a statue. She did not move or speak. Her dark eyes watched everything, but her face showed no emotion. The alien delegates had expected human military people to be loud and aggressive, like their own soldiers, but Yuki was calm and peaceful. This made them more nervous than if she had been carrying a big weapon. After 3 hours of shouting, Council Leader Vexthal raised his 4 metal arms. The room became quiet again. Everyone sat down and looked at the human. It was his turn to speak. According to the ancient protocols, Tejo stood up slowly. He closed his notebook and put his pen away. He walked to the center of the room where a small platform waited for speakers. His footsteps echoed in the silence. All the alien eyes followed him. When he reached the center, he did not begin with the traditional greeting. He did not announce his species' achievements. He did not threaten anyone or make demands. Instead, he said something that shocked everyone in the room. I have a question. He said. His voice was soft, but it carried clearly to every corner of the huge chamber. What does each of you actually want? Silence that followed was complete. Nobody had ever asked that question before. In 300 years of peace talks, nobody had ever asked what anyone actually wanted. They had talked about territory and resources and ancient grudges, but nobody had asked about what they really wanted. General Sektar was the first to recover. From his surprise, he stood up, and his scales rippled with anger. How dare this primitive human ask such a simple question? Of course he knew what he wanted. "We want the bug people to stop taking our breeding worlds," he said. His voice was loud and harsh. "The Nexari must leave our territory and never return. We want them to pay for the damage they have done. We want them to suffer like we have suffered." Widquin speaker. Zikti jumped to her feet, all 6 legs moving at once. Her clicking sounds filled the air. "We need those worlds for our children," she said. "Our population grows every year. We must have new places for them to live. The snake people have hundreds of empty worlds. They are greedy and selfish to hoe." Nodded like he was thinking about something important. He looked at both of them with his calm brown eyes. Then he asked another question that made everyone uncomfortable. "Have either of you looked at the Kepler 442 system?" he said. Both General Sektar and Queen Speaker Zikti stared at him with confusion. What did that system have to do with anything? It was far away from the disputed territory. It was not important to their war. That system has 17 worlds, he continued. His voice stayed calm and friendly. 12 of them have the right temperature for breeding colonies. 5 of them have the mineral deposits that Nexari need for their technology. None of them are claimed by anyone. The silence in the room became even deeper. Everyone stared at Tejo like he had grown another head. In all their years of fighting over the same few worlds, none of them had bothered to look for alternatives. They had been so busy hating each other that they had forgotten to explore. Commander Yuki stepped forward and activated a holographic display that appeared in the air above her hand. The display showed star charts and planetary data. The information proved that Tejo was right. The Kepler 442 system was perfect for both species, and it was completely empty. General Sektar sat down heavily in his chair. His mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. Queen Speaker Zikti made confused clicking sounds and turned to whisper with her advisors. Other delegates began to murmur among themselves in their various languages. Dyer So-young Park stood up from the human delegation table. She was a small woman with kind eyes and gray hair. She had been quietly listening to everything. She walked over to where a group of Trilon delegates sat. "Excuse me," she said politely to the rock people. "I studied your ancient migration stories last night. They are very beautiful. Your ancestors came from worlds with 3 suns and purple skies. Is that correct?" The Trilon delegates nodded slowly. They were surprised that this human knew their old stories. Most species did not care about Trilon history. "Found 3 star systems that match those conditions exactly," she continued. "They are uninhabited, and they have the rare crystals your people need for your art. There are no territorial disputes over any of them." The Trilon delegates looked at each other with amazement. Their people had been searching for worlds like their ancient home for thousands of years. But they had been looking in the wrong places. They had been fighting others for worlds that were not even suitable. Back at the center platform, Tejo continued to speak. "You have all been fighting over the same small piece of space," he said, "but the galaxy is huge. There are millions of worlds out there. Most of them are empty. Most of them are waiting for someone to make them home." He gestured to the holographic display that still floated in the air. "You fight because you think there is not enough space for everyone, but there is enough space for 1,000 times your current populations. The problem is not lack of resources. The problem is that nobody has been looking for solutions." Captain Jinwoo Lee stepped forward from the human security detail. He was a tall man with scars on his hands from old battles, but his voice was gentle when he spoke. "I have studied every war in galactic history," he said. "Most of them started because someone was afraid. Someone thought they were going to lose something important." He looked around the room at all the different species. "You are all afraid," he continued. "You are afraid there will not be enough room for your children. You are afraid other species will take what you need. But fear makes you think small. Fear makes you fight over scraps when there are feasts waiting in unexplored space." The delegates began to understand something that frightened them more than any weapon. These humans had not just studied their military strength or their political power. They had studied everything. They knew about ancient stories and breeding habits and population growth and resource needs. They had looked at problems from angles that nobody else had ever considered, and somehow, in just a few weeks of preparation, they had found solutions that the greatest minds in the galaxy had missed. For centuries, this was not possible. It should not be possible, but the evidence was right there, floating in the holographic display. Humans were not just making peace, they were making war look stupid, and that was the most dangerous thing anyone could do. By the 3rd day, everything had changed. The peace talks did not look like any peace talks in galactic history. Tejo had solved 5 major territorial disputes. Before lunch, he did not use threats or bribes or military force, he just asked questions, and showed maps and suggested alternatives that nobody else had thought of. The alien delegates were getting more scared with each solution. The human was making their ancient enemies look foolish. Their centuries-old wars were being revealed as simple misunderstandings. This should have made them happy, but instead it made them terrified. Dar So-young Park had spent the previous evening having tea with the Trillon delegation. She sat on the floor of their quarters, sharing their traditional drink made from crushed crystals. She listened to their stories about the old homeworlds and the great migration that brought them to this part of the galaxy. The next morning, she presented her findings to the council. She had found 3 star systems that perfectly matched the environmental conditions the Trillon needed. These systems had the right gravity, the right temperature, and, most importantly, the right type of crystal formations that the Trillon used for their sacred Artelder Crondal. Of the Trillon delegation stood up slowly. His rock body creaked like old stone. His voice was deep and rumbling like an earthquake. "How did you know about our sacred needs?" he asked. "Most species think we only care about mining and construction. They do not know about our art." Dar So-young smiled gently. "I read your poetry," she said. "I studied your sculptures. I learned about your ceremonies. Your art is beautiful, and it tells the story of your people. It tells me what you truly need, not just what you say you want." The other delegates stared in shock. None of them had ever bothered to learn about Trillon art. They thought the rock people were just simple miners who dug holes in planets. They never knew that Trillon created some of the most beautiful sculptures in the galaxy. This was when the delegates began to understand something frightening about humans. They did not just study military data or economic reports. They studied everything. They learned languages and read poetry and listened to children's songs. They understood other species better than those species understood themselves. Captain Jinwoo Lee stood up to address the assembly. His uniform was plain and simple, but his presence filled the room. When he spoke, his voice was calm, but his words hit like hammer blows. "I have studied every major war in galactic history," he said. "All of them started the same way. Fear, fear of losing resources, fear of being attacked, fear of being forgotten. Fear makes people do stupid things. Fear makes smart people make terrible decisions." He gestured to the various delegates around the room. "You are all afraid right now. You are afraid of being conquered. You are afraid of losing your importance. You are afraid that peace will make you irrelevant, but fear is the enemy, not each other." General Sektar hissed angrily, his scales turning darker red. "You know nothing about fear, human," he said. "You come from a safe little world where nobody threatens you. You do not understand what it means to fight for survival." Captain Jinwoo looked at the general with sad eyes. "You are wrong," he said quietly. "Earth has had more wars than any world in the galaxy. We have fought each other for thousands of years. We know about fear. We know about hatred. We know about the terrible things that fear makes people do." He paused and his voice became softer. "That is why we are here. We have learned that fear is a liar. Fear tells you that there is not enough space, not enough resources, not enough hope, but fear is always wrong. There is always enough if you are willing to share. There is always a way if you are willing to look." The room became very quiet. The delegates were beginning to understand that humans were not naive, peace-loving fools. They were a species that had learned hard lessons about war and had chosen a different path. This made them even more dangerous because their kindness came from strength, not weakness. Dar Jamin Han, the human philosopher, requested permission to speak. He was an old man with white hair and gentle eyes, but when he spoke, his words carried the weight of deep wisdom. "You think we are trying to trick you," he said. "You think this is some kind of elaborate plan to conquer you, but you are wrong. We are not here to take anything from you. We are here to give you something that you have forgotten." We walked slowly around the room, looking at each delegate in turn. "You have forgotten how to hope," he continued. "You have been fighting for so long that you think fighting is all there is. You have been afraid for so long that you think fear is normal. But it does not have to be this way." Minister Yunhai Cho, the human cultural specialist, activated another holographic display. This one showed images of children from every species in the room. Young Vorthok playing in crystal gardens, young Nexari learning to fly, young Trillon carving their first sculptures. "Look at them," she said. Her voice was soft but clear. "These children do not hate each other. They do not fear each other. They play together. When their parents are not watching, they share food and toys and games. They do not care about ancient grudges or territorial disputes. Children were friends. The young ones from different species worked together, explored together, laughed together. When no adults were around to teach them to hate, they naturally chose to love. This is what we want to give back to you, Minister Yunhai. Continued, we want to give you a galaxy where your children do not have to be afraid, where they do not have to fight wars that started before they were born, where they can be friends instead of enemies. Speaker Zikti made soft clicking sounds. That meant sadness. In Nexari language, my children ask me why they cannot play with Vorthok. Younglings, she said, I tell them it is because the snake people are our enemies. But they do not understand why anyone must be an enemy. General Sektar was quiet for a long time. His red scales had turned almost purple, which meant he was thinking deeply. Finally, he spoke in a voice much softer than usual. My daughter draws pictures of Nexari. Children she has never met, he said. She imagines what it would be like to have friends who could fly. Truth was spreading through the room like ripples in water. The adults had been so busy fighting that they had forgotten what their children actually wanted. Their children wanted friends. They wanted to explore. They wanted to learn about other species, not fight. Then Tahoe stood up again and walked to the center of the room. You are not bad people, he said. You are good people who have been trapped in bad situations for so long that you forgot there were other choices. Your ancestors started these fights for good reasons, but those reasons are gone. Now he looked around at all the different species. The threats your ancestors faced no longer exist. The resources they fought over are no longer scarce. The fears that drove them to war are no longer real, but you keep fighting because fighting is all you remember. How to do, Admiral? Hyansu Jiang stepped forward from the human security detail. He was a military man, but his words were about peace. We are not asking you to forget your history, he said. We are asking you to stop letting your history control your future. Your children deserve better than endless war. The delegates sat in stunned silence. They were beginning to realize that the humans were right. Their conflicts had become habits rather than necessities. They were fighting because they had always fought, not because they needed to fight. The reasons for war had disappeared, but the wars continued anyways. This was the most uncomfortable truth of all. The galaxy had been wasting centuries on pointless conflicts. They had been teaching their children to hate for no good reason. They had been choosing fear over hope and war over peace, not because they had to, but because they had forgotten that other choices existed. The humans had not come to conquer them. The humans had come to remind them of what they had lost: the ability to imagine a better future, and that was more dangerous than any weapon, because once you remember how to hope, it becomes impossible to accept despair. The fourth day brought the biggest shock of all. The ancient war between the Silicon Lords and the Carbon Collective had been going on for over 1,000 years, had different biology, different philosophy, different ways of thinking about life itself. The Silicon Lords were made of metal and crystal and computer chips. They thought logically and moved slowly. They believed that carbon-based life was messy and chaotic and wasteful. They wanted order and efficiency and perfect systems. The Carbon Collective included all the species made of flesh and blood and organic matter. They thought with emotions and moved quickly. They believed that silicon-based life was cold and heartless and boring. They wanted freedom and creativity and beautiful chaos. These two groups had been killing each other for so long that nobody remembered why the war started. They just knew that silicon people and carbon people were supposed to be enemies. It was written in their history books, taught in their schools, carved into their monuments. But on the fourth day, Tahoe did something impossible. Nobody had ever tried this before. The Silicon Lords and Carbon Collective leaders had never been in the same room together except to declare warlord. Crystal's voice sounded like a computer speaking. His movements were precise and calculated. He had fought carbon species for 300 years. Matriarch Valandra spoke for the Carbon Collective. She was a being of flowing organic matter that changed colors with her emotions. Her voice was musical and warm. Her thoughts moved like lightning. She had dedicated her life to destroying silicon species. Was sealed and no recording devices were allowed. But when the three figures emerged, everything had changed. Lord Zixbrime and Matriarch Valandra stood together. They announced that the 1,000-year war was over immediately. All fighting would stop. All weapons would be put away. They would begin working together on joint research projects. The other delegates could not believe what they were hearing. Human for 3 hours, this was impossible. This could not be real. But it was real, and soon everyone learned how the human had done Itmanji. People talked. She was small and shy, and most of the aliens had not paid attention to her, but she had been working on something that would change. With Solid, she had been researching the genetic history of both the Silicon Lords and the Carbon Collective. She had made a discovery that no one else had ever made. Using advanced analysis of ancient DNA traces and mineral compositions she had found something amazing. Both groups of species had evolved from the same original life forms billions of years ago. They were not different types of life. They were the same life that had split into different paths long ago. There had been a terrible disaster. On their shared homeworld, some of the original species had survived by becoming more mechanical and structured. These became the ancestors of the Silicon Lords. Others had survived by becoming more organic and flexible. These became the ancestors of the Carbon Collective. They were not enemies. They were family. They were cousins who had forgotten their shared origin. They had been fighting their own relatives for 1,000 years without knowing it. Revelation hit the assembly like a shockwave. If humans could discover such fundamental truths about species that had been studied for millennia, what else might they learn? What other basic facts about galactic civilization were wrong? Lord Zixprime spoke in his computer voice, but now it carried emotion. The human showed us genetic markers that prove our common ancestry, he said. We have been fighting ourselves. We have been destroying our own family matriarch. Valandra flowed and shifted as she spoke, her organic form pulsing with new colors. Our children will learn the truth, she said. They will know that silicon and carbon are not enemies, but two parts of the same. Beautiful Holder So-young Park stood up to explain how the discovery had been made. We did not just study your current biology, she said. We studied your ancient fossils, your geological records, your archaeological sites. We looked at your past to understand your present. Sheet activated a holographic display that showed the evolutionary tree of both species groups. The branching patterns clearly showed the common origin that had been hidden for billions of years. Your ancestors faced a choice, she continued. Both led to successful survival. Captain Jin Woo Lee added his analysis. From a strategic perspective, your war never made sense, he said. You were fighting over philosophical differences that actually made you stronger when combined silicon logic. Plus, carbon creativity equals perfect problem solving. The implications were staggering. If humans could rewrite the basic assumptions about the oldest conflict in the galaxy, on misunderstandings, how many other enemies were actually family? Admiral Hyensu Jiang observed the changed atmosphere in the room and made notes for his report to Earth. The other species were beginning to understand that humans approached problems from completely different angles. They did not just look at current situations, they traced everything back to its origins. They studied not just what was happening, but why it had started happening. They learned not just about political positions, but about the deep history that created those positions. They understood that most conflicts were not really about what people claimed to be fighting over. Evidence that many of the territorial disputes were based on outdated information. Some of the resource wars were over materials that could now be created artificially. Some of the philosophical differences were about questions that science had already answered. The fear in the room was growing stronger. The delegates were realizing that humans did not just solve problems. By habit, Sergeant Tae-young Park, from the human security detail, made an observation that chilled everyone. The reason you find our methods disturbing is that we show you how much time and energy have accomplished nothing except preventing you from accomplishing great things. Jamin Han, the philosopher, spoke gently, but his words were devastating. You have been so busy fighting each other that you have not explored most of your own galaxy. You have been so focused on old grudges that you have not solved the real problems that face all of you. He gestured to data, displays showing unexplored space and unsolved challenges while you fought over small territories. Vast regions of space remained empty while you argued over resources new technologies could have created. Abundance while you nurtured hatred you could have been building. Friendship. The truth was becoming clear. The humans had not come to impose their will on the galaxy. They had come to show the galaxy how to stop imposing limitations on itself. Every conflict they solved revealed how much potential had been wasted on pointless fighting. Tahoe returned to the center platform for his final statement of the day. You are not stupid people, he said. You are brilliant people who have been trapped in stupid situations. The same intelligence you used for war can be used for creation. The same passion you put into fighting can be put into exploring the galaxy. Vast and mostly empty, he continued, there are millions of worlds waiting to be discovered. There are countless mysteries waiting to be solved. The fourth day ended with a new understanding that humans were not just making peace. They were revealing that war itself was a choice, and there were better choices available. The most dangerous thing about humans was not their weapons or their technology. It was their refusal to accept that problems could not be solved. The fifth day started with panic. The news about the Silicon Lords and Carbon Collective had spread throughout the galaxy overnight. Ancient enemies were suddenly allies. Wars that had lasted centuries were ending in hours. The entire foundation of galactic politics was crumbling. Many species were terrified. If humans could solve conflicts, this easily would happen to all the people whose jobs depended on managing these wars. What about the weapons manufacturers who made fortunes selling guns to both sides? What about the military leaders whose power came from commanding armies? Nexari Warcast was in complete chaos. Their entire society was built around being professional soldiers. They had spent thousands of years perfecting their military skills, their social rank, their marriage prospects, their children's futures, all depended on their role as Wario sub-commander. Richtel of the Warcast stood up during the morning session. His compound eyes were flashing angry colors. His mandibles clicked rapidly. If there are no wars, what happens to us? He demanded. We know nothing but fighting. Voice became desperate and angry. You humans come here with your peace and your understanding, but you destroy our way of life. We are warriors without war. We are soldiers without battles. What are we supposed to become similar? Concerns echoed around the room. The Vorthok military nobility faced the same crisis. Their scales had turned gray with worry. The Trilon defense guilds were meeting in emergency sessions. Profited most from war, the weapons dealers, the mercenary companies, the territorial administrators who governed disputed zones. These beings had grown rich and powerful by keeping conflicts alive. They would not give up their profits easily. The lunch break, Sergeant Yunhai Cho noticed something wrong. Her human ability to read micro-expressions and body language had been trained. By years of studying alien species, she saw the subtle signs that someone was planning violence. A group of beings from different species were gathering near the emergency exits. Their movements were too coordinated to be casual. Tehosh alerted the security team immediately. Captain Jinwoo Lee moved his people into position without causing alarm. They surrounded the potential attackers while appearing to be doing routine security checks. The attack came during the afternoon. Session. A Nexer assassin tried to throw a poison dart at Teho while he was speaking. But Sergeant Yunhai had been watching the assassin's breathing pattern and muscle tension. She moved to block the dart before it was even thrown. The dart hit her shoulder instead of Teho's neck. She collapsed, but she had prevented the assassination. The security team immediately captured the assassin and several accomplices who had been positioned around the room. The poison was designed to kill humans. Specifically, someone had studied human biology carefully enough to create a targeted weapon. This was not a random act of violence. While the medical team worked to counteract the poison, the sergeant was unconscious, but alive. The quick action had saved both her life and Teho's. The assassination attempt had failed, but the attempt itself changed everything. It proved that some species would rather commit murder than accept peace. It showed that there were beings in the galaxy. It revealed the ugly truth about those who benefited from War Council leader Vextel was horrified. His energy form flickered with shame and anger. This attack violates every law of diplomatic immunity, he said. The beings responsible will face the ultimate punishment. This dishonors us, Algernon. The attack. The human woman saved the life of the man who is bringing peace to our people, he said. Any being who attacks peace negotiators is not a warrior, but a coward, and a criminal. Queen Speaker Zikti made clicking sounds of deep respect. The human security officer saw the danger that we missed, she said. She protected not just Ambassador Teho, but all of us. About humans, they had come to the peace talks knowing they might be killed for trying to make peace. They had risked their lives not for conquest or profit, but for the simple hope that suffering could be reduced. Admiral Hyansu Jang addressed the assembly with quiet dignity. We knew this was possible, he said. We knew that some beings would prefer war to peace. We came anyway because we believe that most of you want something better for your children. He gestured to where Sergeant Yun was recovering. That brave woman took a poisoned dart meant for our ambassador. She did not hesitate. She did not think about her own safety. She thought only about protecting the chance for Pia. The light When humans first developed space travel, he said, we had a choice. We could use it to spread our wars to the stars, or we could use it to spread our hope. We chose hope. He looked around at all the different species represented in the room. But hope is dangerous to those who profit from despair. Peace is threatening to those who make money from violence. Economic data, the galactic war economy, employs millions of beings, she said. Weapons, manufacturing, territorial administration, conflict mediation, military supply chains, all of these industries depend on keeping you fighting. She highlighted specific companies and organizations. Some of these businesses have been deliberately prolonging conflicts to maintain their profits. Was shocking. Many of the longest-running conflicts had been artificially extended by outside interference. Arms dealers had been providing just enough weapons to keep wars going, but not enough for anyone to win decisively. Mediators had been making agreements that they knew would fail. Captain Ginwoo Lee presented military intelligence that revealed the scope of the problem. There is a shadow network of war profiteers, he said. They have been manipulating galactic politics for generations. They create conflicts when none exist. They escalate small disputes into major wars. The assassination attempt was not random violence, he continued. It was a business decision. Someone decided that peace was bad for their profits, so they tried to kill the person making peace. This shows how desperate they have become. Mateo stood up slowly and walked to where Sergeant Yunhai was resting. She was conscious now, but weak from the poison. Saving my life, he said, but more importantly, thank you for saving the hope. For Perseus smiled weakly and whispered back, that is what humans do for each other, sir. We protect hope. Tahoe stood and faced the assembly. This attack proves something important, he said. Peace is not free. Someone always has to pay the price. Usually the price is paid by those who profit from war, but sometimes it is paid by those who choose to risk everything for something better. He gestured to the recovering sergeant. We knew we might die coming here. We came anyway because we believe that your children deserve a galaxy without war. Had not come as conquerors or even as mediators. They had come as people, willing to die for strangers, willing to sacrifice their own safety for the slim chance that others might live better lives. This was what made humans truly dangerous. They actually meant what they said about peace, and they were willing to pay any price to make it real. The final day of the peace talks began with something that had never happened before. In galactic history, every major conflict in the galaxy had been resolved. Not through conquest or surrender, but through understanding and creative solutions. Problems that had seemed impossible for centuries had been solved in less than a week. The delegations sat in stunned silence as they reviewed the agreements. They thought they wanted that humans had found ways for every species to achieve their goals without preventing others from achieving theirs. Or activate holographic displays. He simply walked to the center of the room and began to speak in his calm, quiet voice. We ghosts battling shadows, struggling against problems that no longer exist. He gestured to the various delegations around the room. Really, your enemies. Your problems were not really problems. Your limitations were not really limitations. General Sektar leaned forward, his red scales catching the light. What are you saying, human? He asked. Do you claim that our struggles have been meaningless? Deho looked at him with gentle eyes. I am saying that your struggles have been unnecessary, he replied. You have been fighting battles that you had already won. You have been afraid of threats that had already disappeared. You have been solving the same problems over and over, instead of moving on to new challenges. So Young Park stood up and activated a comprehensive display showing resource for everyone, she said. Enough resources for everyone. Enough opportunities for everyone. The scarcity you fight over is artificial. She highlighted vast regions of unexplored space, while you have been fighting over these few systems. Millions of other worlds have remained empty while you have been competing for limited resources. New technologies have made unlimited resources possible. Captain Jinwoo Lee added military analysis. Your wars have become habits rather than necessities, he said. You fight because your ancestors fought. Your ancestors fought because they faced real threats and real shortages. But those conditions ended centuries ago. Minister Yunhai Cho presented cultural data. Your children do not understand why you fight, she said. They see other species as potential friends, not automatic enemies. They dream of exploration and cooperation, not conquest and domination. Admiral Heian-su. Military conflict in galactic history, he said. None of them accomplished anything that could not have been achieved through cooperation. All of them cost more than they gained. The delegates began to understand what the humans were really saying. The entire structure of galactic civilization was built on a foundation of unnecessary conflict. They had been wasting their potential for millennia, fighting wars that served no purpose except to continue fighting. Quinspeaker, Zikti made soft, clicking sounds of confusion. Then, why do we fight at all? She asked. If our conflicts serve no purpose, why did they continue? Ho smiled sadly. Then understanding you fight, because learning to cooperate requires effort, and changing your minds requires courage. J.R. Jamin Han stood up to deliver the philosophical framework. We are not asking you to change who you are, he said. We are asking you to become who you could be. Every species here has capabilities that could benefit all others. He gestured to each delegation in turn. The Vorthok understand biological systems better than anyone else. The Nexari can organize complex projects. With perfect efficiency, the Trilon create beauty that inspires hope. The Silicon Lords process information with absolute accuracy. Instead of using your talents to fight each other, use them to explore the unknown. Instead of competing for limited resources, work together to create unlimited possibilities. Minister Yunahaicho presented the final proposal. Restructuring of galactic civilization, she said. Instead of a system based on competition and conflict, we propose a system based on cooperation and mutual benefit. Exchange programs, economic partnerships that would benefit everyone. No species would lose anything. Everyone would gain more than they could achieve. Alone, Captain Sora Yang, representing Earth military forces, stepped forward for the final statement. That would echo through galactic history. Her uniform was simple, but her presence commanded attention from every being in the room. Humanity declares war, she said, and the room tensed with fear. We will fight ignorance with education. We will fight fear with understanding. We will fight hatred with compassion. Her voice grew stronger and more determined. Any species that chooses to continue unnecessary conflicts will find themselves facing not our weapons, but our absolute determination to help them find better solutions. We will not conquer your planets. We will conquer your problems. We take your resources. We will show you how to create more resources than you ever imagined, possibly. Ho returned to the center of the room for his final words. The galaxy faces a choice, he said. You can continue the old way of thinking, where every gain requires someone else's loss, where every success requires someone else's failure, where every moment of peace is just preparation for the next war. You can choose a new way where success is shared, where problems are solved together, where peace is not the absence of war, but the presence of hope, where exploration replaces exploitation, and where cooperation replaces competition. Believe that every species can be better than they are. We choose to work for a future that benefits everyone. We choose to fight against the idea that fighting is inevitable. The silence in the room was complete. Every delegate understood that they were witnessing the end of one era and the beginning of another. The humans had not conquered the galaxy through superior firepower or advanced technology. They had conquered something far more powerful. They had proven that conflict was a choice, not a law of nature. They had demonstrated that cooperation was more effective than competition. When he said the old galaxy is dead, long live the new galaxy, the peace talks ended not with a treaty, but with a transformation. The galaxy had learned that the most dangerous thing humans could bring to any situation was not superior weapons or advanced technology, but an unshakable belief that there was always a better way. In trying to make peace, humanity had accidentally declared war. Of the need for conquest itself, and perhaps most importantly, it was a war that humanity was clearly going to win. The final irony was not lost on anyone present. The galaxy had spent centuries preparing for the day when humans would join galactic civilization. They had expected conquest, expansion, territorial disputes, and military conflicts. Instead, they got something far more dangerous. Galaxy would have to learn how to live in a universe where war was no longer inevitable. The age of unnecessary conflict was over. The age of unlimited possibility had begun, and it had all started with a simple question. What do you actually want?